Welcome to the Quality of Mind podcast, where you can explore the pioneering and game-changing understanding that unlocks the secret sauce to more productivity, peace, and potential. If you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber to personal development and human potential, and if you want to be part of the new breeders of leaders and entrepreneurs, come and explore the before psychology approach, enabling sustainable, wide-ranging transformation in every aspect of life and work, for exponential, not just marginal gains. Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. This episode is taken from a conversation I had with Dr. Amy Johnson on her wonderful podcast called Changeable. And regular listeners might know that Amy and I have done quite a few episodes together. Now, in this episode, we look at what we call the world as a mirror. And we're having a practical yet profound exploration of what happens when we stop trying to fix life and start seeing it as a mirror giving us some feedback. So whether that's friction with parenting or leadership or your business or your own personal growth plateaus, there's times when that separate self-identity sneaks in. And this episode shows you how to spot that. So if you sense there's more to you than the story than you are in your head, this episode is going to be a fascinating one for you to explore.
Hey, Piers, thank you so much for coming back to chat with me on Changeable.
It's always such an enjoyable pleasure to do this, Amy. So I love your work, I love your community, and whatever we talk about in the next hour or so, I know will be enjoyable, curious. So I'm totally up for it. So thank you for having me on. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. And it feels good. It's nice to just come here and we'll have zero plan and we'll just kind of see where this heads. And already it's kind of started heading, as is always the case, isn't it? Like I should just press record before we even ever open our mouths. But I'll just say this and then we'll just see where this takes us. So we were just talking about silent retreats, among other things, and which everyone listening probably knows, I talk about it all the time now. It's my favorite thing. And that it's such an interesting opportunity to just truly be there and let everything be exactly what it is and just let things show up the way they show up. And this is kind of how I feel it is. It's like there's just this, almost like you're looking in this forbidden room. It's like there's you're just seeing life as it wants to be, period. No manipulation, no changing, no running, nowhere to run, nothing to do to distract because you're just sitting in silence. And sometimes that is completely blissful and sometimes it's really uncomfortable. And usually for everyone, it's a combination of all of that. For me, it tends to go more on the uncomfortable side initially, although now I will say, who knows, but it seems like it's different. It falls quiet much faster. But when I first started doing this, it was definitely not at all quiet, but there was still a sense of this is what needs to happen. And I don't know how I knew that. I don't know where that comes from, but it was like, okay, this is loud and it's a lot and and I think it's what I'm running from. I think it's what all the distraction is about, just some sense of that. So I know that kind of folds in with what we were maybe going to discuss here. So I don't know. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Amy. So you've looked at it from a really nice angle. I hadn't really thought about it from the perspective of silent retreats, but I'll weave that back in. But I suppose the thing that's fascinating, isn't it, is once we've sort of seen the nature of a little bit more about what we are, right, and that we are part of this system, that there's just a me that turns up and there's a life going on, and that there's both of those things, and it's all happening. There's things that we think and feel and perceive. Whereas we've been slightly conditioned, or completely conditioned, should I say, rather than slightly, we've been completely conditioned to from materialism to think that's happening to me, us, and there's a world out there of people, buses, trees, and economies, and politicians, and bank balances, and stuff that I then need to do something about because that's out there and I'm in here. Once we see that that's not quite actually how it works, So rather than go into, well, it doesn't matter then because it's all just, if there's no world out there for me to fix, what's the point of me, right? Rather than sort of go there, kind of dystopian kind of fate-driven. Well, there's no point then because if all I am is just a figment of mind's imagination, what's the point of me? What what the other direction to look in, or the direction we would urge people to look in, is to see that everything, every thought, feeling, perception that is in the mind's eye, to use that phrase very vaguely, within psychology, is just a beautiful reflection or creation from the individuated mind's take on deeper reality, which we're never going to really know what it is. So the world, just to use the phrase then, but to really unpack this, is the world becomes just a fantastic mirror of what there is to be seen. Now, what does that mean, what there is to be seen? Well, I think it's a little bit what you were pointing to in the silent retreat. Things will just present themselves in the world, in the world of your mind or in the external world. And normally we would then busy ourselves trying to work them out or kind of turn away from them or distract ourselves from them, whether that's a feeling or a thought. But if we can see that they're all just invitations, if you like, to look at what the individuated mind of Piers or Amy is in that moment creating. There's no fixedness to it. It's all real but never true, as I say. There's no substantive, objective reality truth to it. It's just the mind. You start to see that there's just a total gift and invitation in it all. And I think the ways we can see that most clearly in the two parts of the mirror that I would say is in others. So how another appears to us, particularly those others that we know incredibly well, like our spouses, our children, our parents, our, whatever it is, those intimate relationships, what they're showing, and in our, let's call it desires or our wants in any moment. And this can get really practical. So to look at how, if we know that everything that is created in our psychology in the moment is part of a kind of field, that field just becomes something to play with and or to see, rather. You can't really play with it actively, but you can be observing of it. And you start to see that even the tiniest little things that might create a moment of uncomfort or resistance because of self-identification in another or in our want is showing us something that maybe we haven't seen yet about our own conditioning. So that's where it comes back to what you're saying about the invitation. And actually, if we then look at that from the understanding of being in awareness of it rather than it happening to me, so from, to put it technically, from the non-dual understanding, from knowing what we truly are at our essential nature, if we look at it of that, we can, well, firstly, it won't cause us so much suffering, but secondly, it seems to engage or activate the learning extravaganza of the system for us to evolve in our seeing. And then that has the most amazing ability to change what then gets created from this mind field in a creating magically way, which is why people can experience what might have been a tricky or difficult situation or relationship just dissolve into, that worked out. Or something that used to really bother us, full of friction and struggle, and just become like a travelator of emergence and resourcefulness. So there's probably a load to get into that, but that's the kind of overall piece. If that wasn't too confusing or rambling, Amy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there is a lot in there. One thing I guess to maybe say up front or ask about is so so does it look like there's a sort of like, this is not going to be the right words, but like a clarifying, evolving almost agenda to things, meaning like not that there is a agenda anywhere, but it does feel on some way like yes, we meet what's here. We see what's here to be seen because it's here, and that does something. And we want to be careful about hanging on our expectations of that, but it does seem to, yeah, like you said, it just shows us more. Like I don't know. So like what's your take on that?
It's a great question, but with the thing you've already pointed out, that the slight red herring of that question would be then to try and work out your life's path and what the universe is trying to show you, and then self-identify with the, oh, I was, blah, blah. So if we put that to the side, that we don't self-identify with the I need to uncover life's purpose for me, and it, yes, I would. So the answer would be yes to your question, as long as we don't go down the trap of thinking that's then our new self-identification process. And I suppose you can see that more practically everyday terms when people will say things like, we'll look back on this as a gift, or it's the gift I wish I never had, but with actually was incredibly valuable. So we kind of know that from adversity, discomfort, some people might even call it necessity, freshness occurs.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that's accidentally, invisibly, innocently we've slightly got wrong now is that we turn away from discomfort, right? And you've talked about this for ages, and I do too. You know how we need to lean in, and because society now, there aren't really many sort of physical threats to us so much. I mean, there still are some in the world. I'm not belittling those, but most of us can have quite a comfortable life in our society. Um, we psychologically got used to comfort as well. Or we think freedom leads to comfort. We think freedom comes from comfort, and then freedom is the opposite of comfort in a way. Freedom is the ability to be discomforted, to have discomfort or comfort. And I think sometimes when we look at the world in those things that are a little uncomfortable, as you were saying in the silent retreat, there's something there. And then once we see that, freshness comes, and evolution and growth comes from that.
Yes.
So it's a long way of answering your question, but saying yes, I think.
Yeah, and I think you really picked on the piece that makes that seem tricky is when it's about me, when it's my
Yeah.
life path and my agenda and my even my growth, as opposed to being in a place where it just is what it is, and let's just feel it because duh, it's here. It's reality right here, right now. And then it kind of keeps that me in
And especially if we think the me has a job to do to find it, right? So if we forget that, if we think we have volition and free will, then we're going to go and try and find it. And we're never going to be able to do that as a separate me, right? So the system will find it, if whatever the it is. It's not up to you, right? It's not like, oh, now I've got to put it on my list. I've got to find this thing that Piers and Amy are talking about, which is the things in life I need to lean into. It's not like that, because there's no, well, it would appear it's like that.
yeah,
But when we're open, these things rock up, these things turn up.
yeah,
Yeah. When we're not just, maybe rather than saying when we're open, because you might go, what does open mean? It seems to me that when we're not, let's say, distracted by looking in the other direction, these things turn up.
yeah,
Right. So go back to your silent retreat. What I guess happens, if we were trying to technically understand it in a silent retreat, because you don't have to fix anything or do anything, you just sit and just be, then there's no going away from it.
hmm,
Or so you can just, and then that's what I mean by being open. You're just facing it,
yeah,
rather than life now distracts our attention. So I mean, gosh, we are in a society that tries to buy your attention through devices and foods and activities the whole time. So we never really put attention on it.
yeah,
Not that we can put it, but the system never gets allowed to put attention on it. And when it does, I find it so fascinating, because some of what I would use the word nuance of things you might have just completely ignored become quite fascinating. So I don't know what it's like for you, but I'm kind of lucky now, I guess, but I don't have a lot of things that give me a high emotional charge. I'm a pretty stable person, if you want to call it that. But there's still little things where I might literally or metaphorically roll my eyes, right? If someone's like, my dad might say something, and I'll be like, no, it won't bother me massively. I'm not like having a big meltdown at it, and it won't plague my thoughts and make me have an unhappy day. But just noticing little tiny things like that, getting super forensic, if you want to call it that, right? To go, oh, okay. So in the mirror, there is another that it looks like my dad or my kids or whatever. There's a literal metaphorical eye roll. Not that I need to overthink it, but what's that about?
Yeah.
Right? What in the mirror, the metaphorical mirror, is that about? And when you look at that, not trying to figure it out from a kind of neurolinguistic programming perspective or something like that, but just from a, what is it is the self? What's the self up to in that moment? What's being sort of slightly triggered or wanted, or what looks like it's unavailable in that moment?
Mhm.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be about big stuff. It can be, but you can just
Well,
start little.
no, okay. So yeah, it's like what I really hear you pointing to is how it gets more and more subtle, I think, in terms of what you're noticing,
Yeah.
like at one point, well, just to say it this way, like maybe someone is very mind identified. There's very much of me and my life, and things should go this way, and I have all these problems to work out, and that's very abstract. And it doesn't feel abstract when that's how it looks, 'cause it just looks like that's life, right? Well, yeah, I'm a
Yes.
me, and I have a life to manage, and there's these problems, and I need to think about them. Like that just looks how it is. And then this is kind of how it's just been for me, where it's like, okay, but then there can be like more and more of a recognition of that is all conceptual. Like that's in the abstract. And as you say, it's real but not true. It's real as far as abstract thought is real. But what's really here? And there's this kind of sense of like, for me anyway, like has been of like coming down into like, well, what's the raw essence of life? It's not an
Mm-hmm.
idea about me
Mm-hmm.
and where I'm headed, and he shouldn't have said that. It's there's a lot that's like right here, immediate. It just feels like it's more in just the essence of life and like the raw material rather than the ideas about it. And there's more of like a sinking into that, and that's where I feel like here anyway, like those subtleties have really picked up where I have that there's that ability, I guess, to kind of feel the eye roll, internal eye roll, and just and notice that and maybe even feel it before it fully forms. And like notice that little clench or that little push on life or that little bit of something coming up saying, nope, that's wrong, or whatever that is. Whereas I know for sure at some other point like that it would take a lot to even get attention, and then it would erupt into some big emotional reaction, very different from that kind of more subtle thing. So I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in what you said there. I think the the forensicness of the noticing gets more and more subtle,
Mhm.
right? The more we are less in the abstract of the mind and more in the, let's call it, I call it the isness, which is this unhelpful phrase, the what is, the raw what is of just the unfolding of rather than the thinking about the thinking about the thinking,
Yeah.
rather than in the layers
Yeah.
of the fantasy. I mean, it's all at one level an illusion. We know that, right? But there's some of it feels more base level reality,
Mhm.
right? Which is what I call the isness. Now, there's no objectively true isness within the perceptual headset of time, space, and matter and feeling, thought, and perception because it's all a human headset. But within the human headset that we all are in this species, there is a more base isness that is more universal than all of our mind fantasies. So I mean, and we can see that really easily. If we're really, really caught up in a very, very low aperture, our mind goes off on one massively. And the next day we feel more calm and we can look at the same situation and it looks different,
Mhm.
right? And we would go, oh, yesterday I was just awake. Oh, yesterday it was just, oh my God, yeah, I was all over the place. Now I can see it clearly. Now, the it you're seeing is still mind created,
Yeah.
right? And there's still no objective it, but it is nearer to the reality of the human headset. Let's call it truth. It's still real but not true, but it's closer to it. And then when we're looking at that, I think that's where you can start to see what the system is showing you in where you're at, if you like, because your sensory acuity is more tuned in, and you're not trying to fix anything. You can just see it and go, oh yeah, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
There it is, right? And so, and then when you're able to be in awareness of that, because it's quite easy sometimes to ignore, maybe, or bypass could be another phrase for spiritual people, ignore or bypass the other or the want as just mind chatter, right? When we're up in the heavy layers of over conceptualization. But when you're seeing it in the more raw isness, we don't want to be ignoring that. We want to be leaning into that and starting to go, huh, okay, there is an individuated self here that has that appearance of what it wants in that moment. Let's lean into that. Not take it as it happening to me. I need to fix myself, and not go down that road, but go into what is that showing about the conditioned individuated self.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can use that as a doorway in, a path in, to seeing where you're still self-identified without really noticing it, without having realized. So then you and another person or relationship will do exactly the same, because they're a beautiful mirror. They can show us where the mind is accidentally, invisibly still propping up its own identity through the appearance and the isness. Now, does that sound it sounded horribly complicated to me as I said it. I don't know how it sounded to you. I can probably make it easier, but
Well, I'm just thinking about someone who's might be thinking like how, and not like steps, but like, like there is just a place where we're, yeah, we're very much in the abstracted view, and it really looks like, but I am me and they are them, like, but they maybe understand what you're saying intellectually on some level. Like how can they start to come down into this more sub
yeah, I think that's a great question, because you just look at what turns up in the mirror. I mean, I don't mean the mirror in the bathroom. I mean in life, right? And it might be in a morning you wake up and think, okay, I I need to message my colleagues, or I need to write a LinkedIn post, or I need to tell my kids this, right? And in that there is a desire or a want in something. And it might look very kind of, well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong in any of those three things. What's wrong with those things? And there may not be, and there's nothing wrong with them. But if we can look at what is being sought in those, I'm just making it those three actions, right? And see, is there anything that the individuated me, Piers, is trying to get from that event or circumstance or activity that is fundamentally not an attribute of that activity. So let's say I put a LinkedIn post out, or send a newsletter out, or something like that. And actually what is wanted from that activity is some degree of, I don't know, security about my next program, which will validate to me that I'm going to be okay, or some kind of approval that my fan base still like me, or showing that I'm leading edge and thought provoking in what I do. If it's any of that kind of stuff that's in, or I need to tell my kids to be more like this and study hard today because actually I want to be that kind of parent. There's an identity statement in there, right? So if I'm looking to get something from that activity, behavior, or other, and I'll define this in a moment, but that I already am at my true essential self, right? So if I'm looking for security, peace, validation, okayness, which we are already, right? We at our essence, we are already those things. But if I'm looking to get those from a piece of behavior or an activity, it's that's not going to be there, right? I mean, the most common one, I suppose, would be, I'm doing my job to get financial security. Yeah. Now, security, we already are secure. I don't mean in the game of life secure to be able to buy lots of cars. I don't mean that kind of security. I mean, we are okay, whether we have £0 or £1,000,000 at the level of the self, right? In the game of life, there's an advantage to having money and disadvantage to having money, right? But that's not what we're talking about. But if we're looking for that job or that relationship to make us more secure, we already are it. Now, that's an obvious one. So then you take that idea and take it down into the nuance forensically of your daily wants and see where the self is trying to prop itself up, hiding. And then you go, huh. So I'll give you an example. This might be another example, right? So I often will spend quite a long time trying to cook my kids a nice, healthy meal, home cooked meal, blah, 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 blah. And I'll put more effort into it than just getting them something from the rubbish, right? And you'd think, well, that's a very noble thing. Well done, Piers. That's great. You're doing a great job. And that's for their benefit. Well, actually, how about if I'm actually doing that? The want there is to be the kind of dad that does that, right? And then, so I'll do that. And then my daughter might say to me after I've cooked it and she's had 2 mouthfuls, that's the worst meal I've ever tasted in my life, right? And I get angry at her for saying that. Do you not appreciate that I've just spent an hour doing this? I've got better things to do in my life than cook for you. Blah, 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 blah. Do you not appreciate, what am I getting angry at? I'm getting angry because myself was invested in that activity. And I would say, well, you need to be more respectful to people that try hard for things. You need to be less selfless. You need to say, at least, thanks for trying, Dad. But that's again about me. I want to be the dad that has a daughter that says that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to give you chuck some examples out there to take what you make.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so one kind of nuance on this, I love what you're saying. Like just something I've seen around this is it feels easier, not easier. It feels like more natural to see these things, to feel when something has some insecurity, me, agenda, identity thing hooked into it, when we're feeling rather than like thinking our way through life. Because I think the mind will not let you see that. The mind is very invested in saying, no, she's entitled and she should appreciate that I did this. And it will not really even let you see anything else. That's kind of its job, I think. One of its many jobs, right? Is that it just wants to keep bolstering separation. So of course it's going to be like, no, that's wrong. And I was right and whatever. Yet it's almost like we still kind of know and feel it on some level because it feels work. Someone's opinion about a meal doesn't feel bad to us. Someone's opinion about what we just spent time and effort putting into because we were doing it to bolster our own identity, that feels very bad. Like that's pretty straightforward, right? If you took her to a restaurant, I mean, you still might get mad because you spent the money on the food, but it would be very different than all of your effort, right? So we can feel that, like we feel that. And so I love what you're saying, and I'm just kind of adding in the piece that for me this has come to life when I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Because I
Well, I
can't
think the way I would
start
say
with
that, I think I'm with you on that
yeah.
because I would say that broadly generalizing two things we do to not feel, right? One is just literally distract ourselves,
Yeah.
right? So we go to our phone, we go to Netflix, we go to food, we go to drink, we go to drugs, we go to shopping, we just distract ourselves, right? And gosh, we're good at that, right? And then the second thing we do, which we're also very trained at doing, is, which I think is what you're pointing to, possibly, is we conceptualize our feelings or think about our feelings rather than feel them.
Yeah.
So we would rather than actually go to the feeling and lean in, we would give a conceptualization or a justification and think our feelings.
Yes. Yeah.
And neither the distraction nor the conceptualization are actually feeling them.
Right.
The second one feels closer to it because you can articulate it and say, well, I'm very disappointed in you, or I'm very upset. So we would even put words to it that sound feeling-y,
Yeah.
but I'm not feeling.
Yeah. Or if we're really sophisticated, we might even say, like, gosh, why do I keep getting invested? I see that I just put all this effort into making her a dinner, for my own blah, blah, blah. Like, and why do I keep doing that? It's the same thing. Now
Yeah,
maybe we're on to what's happening, but we're still just thinking about it.
we're still
We're
not
not
feeling.
actually just feeling
Yeah,
it and letting
yeah,
it be what it
because
is.
in all of those, there's still a separate me that needs to be.
Yeah.
There's still a separate object relationship, right?
Yeah.
There's still like a me that needs to have a thinking about it, or me that is it's happening to.
Yeah.
And I think, although in the example I gave, it might still feel like there's a separate me, but seeing it as, oh, that's just a system,
Hmm.
right? There's no her really. There's not really a separate daughter there who's being rude about my cooking or my attentions to try and be a good dad, right? It's all me.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the lovely things about the mirror. Um, and it's easier to see in once maybe than in others, but it's all me. I don't mean me, little Piers. I mean me, the system. But it's all perfect for little Piers to see,
Yeah.
but not because I'm a separate me and it's happening to me, because it's just the whole thing's just playing out beautifully.
Yeah. I've felt this so much lately with my children, especially my daughter who's 15
Oh,
and
mine's 16, so we're on a similarity here
we're
where
similar, yes. And there's something about for me anyway, there has been, like, now she's in high school and everything's a little more important. It's getting, it's just, and so and different things are important to her. So here, what's important is, like, let's do, like, what you do in school matters now. It didn't matter so much before. It was preparation for something, right? But now this is just my own thinking around it. It's like, now this stuff's a little more important. Like, you're going to be going to university and then this and that. And I actually don't hold so tightly to that because I don't, whatever, relatively speaking,
yeah,
but relatively speaking only. I mean, there's still a lot that's coming up around that. And so what I'm noticing is, like, exactly kind of what I think you're pointing to here is that it's very subtle sometimes, but it's like I want to make it could be a very minor. I'm not even talking about starting a fight. I'm talking about a minor little comment of, like, did you finish your Spanish? What are you doing now? Like, like, how'd this go today? And I'm noticing sometimes when there is a sense of me wanting to feel some security in there versus is this actually helpful for her? And
yeah,
not, which I could never really know, but even, is this helpful in this moment? Is this feel good in this relationship in this moment, even? Because I also know that little nagging that even is kind, that's even like, let's study tonight, I'll take your phone while you, like, get ready for your biology test, like that crap, like, grates on people. It adds up. I know what that does to, like, a feeling between two people, I think most of us do, right? So, like, even that little stuff, it's so hard to describe, but it's because it's very subtle, but it's like just that noticing exactly what you're saying. I think, like, what's behind this? Is this for me to
yeah,
feel a tiny bit more peace and control in this moment? Or is it something else? And a lot of times,
yeah.
warmer.
And I think it's a great example. It's exactly, yeah. I was nodding a lot as you were saying all that, because that's all the field, right? Now, justified as, well, I'm a mum that wants to help my daughter. I'm a mum that wants to feel that I'm doing the best I can. I'm a mum that wants to feel a little bit peaceful and in control, even, right? About my daughter. No, it's all you in the way we're saying, quite subtle, but there's obviously some kind of fear in the separate self there that you could get it wrong, or you need to have a little bit of control, or you need to be influencing her behavior in some way. But it's all beautifully playing out to point you back to that, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Now, you don't need to. Here's the interesting thing for people in case they're thinking this is going to be highly analytical and we're almost going down a psychoanalysis, semi-Freudian, Jungian kind of. I need to work me out, and oh gosh, well, what's in my conditioning that means I'm. But I don't think you need to go down there because that takes you back down the conceptualization, overthinky path. However, it's not ignoring it either. And this might sound a bit like, well, which, you kind of both. There's something about being the noticing of it and the awareness of it in both senses of the word awareness, um, the awareness of it and the leaning into it that then creates the, let's call it learning and evolution, which isn't about let's overthink the kahunas out of it and then try and work it all out from a conceptual separate me perspective. But it isn't also about, I'm just going to ignore all this because the universe has got its own way and it will sort itself out. It's not really a middle ground. That would be making a two polarity on it. But there's allowing it to all be, and you see it from the perspective of what the system's up to rather than from the perspective of the separate me. Again, a little bit rubbish words, but you probably get what I'm pointing to.
Yeah, and I think it's where that is not a satisfactory answer to someone is when the focus is on, yeah, but what do I do? Yeah, but what do I do? Which is kind of more of the same of what we're talking about. It's not about what do you do. It's like, would you agree with that? Like, it's not about really what would you do? I mean, what you're saying is like we just feel into this and we see it, and it's like it kind of comes up and just reveals itself, and then whatever.
Well, it reveals itself, and the do tends to come. This is why I think the system's so clever. It comes through from the desires and wants. So the do sorts itself out in the obviousness of what's emerging as a desire or want. So there is, of course, a do. Often there is a practical do sometimes in things, whether that's take the phone off them, don't take the phone off them, email the teacher, don't do that, or what, who knows, right? But I suppose it's checking out that when those desires and wants rock up, that there's no how clean, if I can use that phrase, how clean is the want and desire, or how much is it serving the self that's still trying to be propped up by this? And when you start getting cute to that, or the system starts getting cute to that, it sorts out the do, because the do will come from the want.
Yeah.
As long as the want's not, but all your job is to do, not the job, but all you can point the awareness of the system to do is to see when the want or desire is not clean, as in it's propping up the self.
Yeah.
And I think that's when, so this is why this profundity of this conversation becomes incredibly practical. And the challenge we have in our society is that we turn away from the wants, either from fear or from bypass, same thing. And the same with the mirror. We think it's them.
Yeah.
We think it's the daughter.
And when we turn away, what we're turning away into in a sense is back more into the abstracted view of things. I mean, or maybe just like we're going back into the mind, basically back into thought and saying like, no, this is important, it's her future, like something blanket like that, which isn't really
Probably some
about.
justification, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could go back into justification.
Yeah.
And yeah, a conceptualization or an abstraction which would justify the what's going on. But again, that's not where the action is, right? That's why it's great to get back down into the field, the want, the desire, the other.
Yeah.
Not seeing them as a separate thing, but just more of the mirror going, because the mirror is always, it's a little bit like, overused metaphor, I know, but in GPS, however lost you go, it shows you the way you are from where you are, right? And if you carry on getting lost, it will just keep going back. It will keep showing you. And I think the mirror is always doing that, right? And this is so funny, isn't it? When people have patterns of behavior, and when we cotton onto this, it's like, oh yeah, patterns of behavior in relationships or in habits of avoidance or whatever it is, discomfort. And, it's so easy to see the system's been showing us this for ages, and we just haven't been noticing that's what it was up to.
Mhm.
And it becomes a pattern, and then we conceptualize that pattern as well, that's just kind of how I am.
Yeah.
And that's sort of true as well, but it doesn't mean that's what you fundamentally are, and it doesn't mean there isn't evolution and learning extravaganza of the system for the avatar peers to evolve. But the patterns are telling you something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they are.
And even like the this is how I am, and or like this is my we just see this, I'm sure you do too, in kind of the communities we're in, like this is my thing to work on, like this is my issue to work on. Even that can be very subtle too, because again it is sort of what's showing up in your conditioning. There is something to see through in that, so that's not a bad thing, but I just see that become so, like concrete for someone, where it's just now another distraction. Like
Yes.
if your mind is constant, oh, this is my thing to work on, this is my thing to work on, you're not there's nothing being worked on. It's just the mind going back to a repeated phrase to actually not feel.
Well, that's such a good way of saying it. So I would say that the distinction for people to try and see, and this isn't, it's simple but not easy, right?
Mhm.
Is when we have our thing to work on, and we might have our three or four things that we've been trying to work on as a seeker for the last
Yes.
few years, decades, whatever it is, and there are things. Yeah, I'm getting, my health, my diet, my relationship with my mother or whatever it is. Right? We got our thing, and that's what I call stage two, right? So we're not a victim at it, right?
Hmm.
But we've spotted it. We've gone, there it is. I'm now going to improve myself around this. I'm going to get better at this or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, what we're talking about is different to that.
Right.
We're talking about when that is seen, that whatever it is seen, but not seen from here's me that now needs to work on that and get better at that, right? It's seen as, oh, there's this that is in creation of the psychological field that I'm in, right? And I'm also the me is also part of that psychological creation of that field I'm in, right? That the system's in. And seeing that and leaning into that in a felt way, seeing all the feedback that's there, all the equivalences that are popping up where you're doing exactly the same to someone else that someone's doing to you, and all seeing it all for its glory, maybe not all glory, it might be gore and glory, seeing all that, but knowing it's not happening to anything like a separate identity that's you, but still being totally immersed and intimate with that.
Hmm.
That's when it shifts magically. Not when we're kind of, there's my thing I need to work on. Because as you say, when I'm in my thing trying to work on it, it's still static. It's still subject object. It's still, and they tend not to move. Well, it moves very slightly, but then it turns up somewhere else,
Yeah.
like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it hasn't really. So that's just the system just trying to show you differently.
Yeah.
So we've got to get past that. And I don't think the personal development industry is very good at this because it's still in the paradigm of there's a me that needs to fix everything. So that's why people get stuck in this kind of middle bit.
Yeah. And that's where I think, I mean, two things which are kind of in my experience the same thing. Um, One is like, I don't even know how to say it. I mean, okay, so one, the other one, the one that's a little easier to say is like seeing no self, essentially, because
Yeah.
when there this belief in a self is not so strong, there's just nowhere to hide with all of this stuff coming at you. It's like you are the field. That's obvious. The field is all there is, which is a little more obvious. You still may appear, but it's obvious that you're kind of appearing in the field, right? And so there isn't this identity that's so strong and solid to kind of go retreat into and then try to work out all these problems or all your weaknesses from there. That's the thing that's seen through. So in a really beautiful and, like you say, sometimes gross way, sometimes like really not good way, it's like in your face, this stuff. The sense of everything being a mirror is there in a different way because there's in a sense nowhere to hide from it. Let me just say that one and see what you say about that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty. You can't hide because it's even hiding is part of it,
Yeah.
right? So whatever, and this is the thing that people find a little bit like, huh? Whatever turns up in thought, feeling, and perception, literally, whatever is it. So there's no like, oh, it is sometimes, it isn't other times. No, and even, and I think this is the other one that people find a bit can stretch the cognitive dissonance sometimes is people can go, oh yeah, my thoughts. Yeah, I can see my thoughts are probably representative of where my mind's still self-identified. No, perception, what we literally see in the world,
Yeah.
not just what we feel and what we think, but the way we see a tree or a person or a house or a flower is. So it's not just in the sort of the stuff we talk about with our therapist that you get to see it. No, no, no. It's everything, everything, and particularly the things that look like they're not. you know,
Yeah.
so it's then the point of being alive kind of. This sounds ridiculous as I said, but the point of being alive changes. It's like, oh, what can I see? What can I see as part of it?
Mhm.
And what can I? Well, what are the desires of the me? And how do others appear? And it's just then this bumpy, probably, but rich unfolding of stuff, rather than there's a world out there for me to control, manage, fix,
Yeah.
get around.
It brings us back to that everything's being more of a mystery, back to that I don't know place, which is hard. Like I don't know has always resonated with me as freedom, but there for sure was a long time where it was like, well, I'm gonna try to foster this I don't know mindset through the identity, right? And it, it's scary. You don't want to do that a lot of the time. Like we want to know when we feel like a me, that me is vulnerable and it wants to know stuff. So anyway, it just feels like the whole thing starts to kind of unravel in a sense into the field. And it is, like you're saying, perception, the simple stuff. Like when everything is sort of met with like, ooh, what's this? Then the patterns and all of that, there's nothing to get our ego up about and resist and be afraid of, and that it all just naturally feels so much more. It's just like that curiosity is just there.
Yeah, I think you're right because there's almost a middle phase, isn't there, where we know we can't control everything, so therefore we try and get the self to be better at not controlling, or we
Mhm.
try and get the self better at not knowing. Okay, no, it's better not to know because we'll hear that. It's better. So then we try and teach the self, still thinking we're a separate self, to be better at not knowing or those kind of things, which is hard, scary, hard because the self is designed to know. It's kind of that's the point of its utilitarian functionalness. So, but the stage beyond that, or the stage sounds like it's like a continuum progressiveness, which it isn't really, but in a more expanded aperture, let's say that way. Um, the idea that we would want to know, or that you possibly could ever know, is pointless, right? It just wouldn't really occur to you
I
to.
mean, even the desire to know is goes away.
Yeah. So when there is a desire to know, this is why it's so fascinating using the desires as the kind of part of the compass, is that when there is a desire to know, you can go, aha, right? Not that not denounce that or try and bypass that. It's just to go, there's something desired in this moment
Yeah.
that needs to be known.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now I know what the game's up to.
Yeah.
Right. I can see that.
Yeah.
I can be with that and go with it.
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's a clean one, not a problem. Then you'll just be more richness of expression into the world. If it's an unclean one, right, as in the identity's hiding in that, then and you see through that, then that want will just zoop, dissolve into just I don't want that anymore,
Yeah. And this
right?
is where
So
I think
that's
the
why they're a useful metric, the desires.
yes, and again I keep using this word subtle, but it's like the in the field, like the the feeling, literal sensation, feeling, energetics of wanting to know pop out. And it's like a little bit of a friction. It's like it just
Yeah,
gets your attention more and more. It's like it's so, if there's a preference, it's for the mystery of things. It's for like, I don't want to know I don't need to know that. And that doesn't mean a desire to know doesn't arise. But again, it arises with a bit of identity with it or something, or some tension or some friction that's, again, beautiful because it's kind of pointing us back to the whole thing.
that's the thing to spot, isn't it? It's when it comes with that, let's call it tension or friction or resistance, right? Then you're like, ah, okay, thank you, system. I can see what's going on here. There's something I'm trying to achieve in this want that I think I'm not already,
Mhm.
right? So again, go back to my definition of what a clean available want is when, you know, well, what one isn't is when we're trying to find something that we already are in the desired thing or in the other. So we're trying to find out what we're trying to find something we already are in the other or in the desire, then that's the identity, having a crack at that. If it's not something we already are and it's something just very in the game of life in form, then go for it, right? Um, the other thing I will say though, just to reiterate this, I know we said this at the beginning, but because this could sound like a simple metric, but to me, and I may be wrong in this in the future, but it feels a lot more powerful, easier. It's always simple, but more powerful and easier to recognize that metric once we have some inkling, whether we can express it or not, but we have some inkling of what we are at base level, this essentially. So that's the first place I would still always start with someone is to just see, well, what do you think you are in this? Which eye is asking? Put it that way, right? Which eye is asking? Which eye is thinking it's playing this game at the moment? Because if we're in the paradigm of thinking there's a separate me, then using the others and the using the mirror is going to get really hard because we might spot it, but we'll get stuck in that stage too, right? So I'd always be still pointing people to go back to see what they're seeing about the nature of what they are first.
Yeah.
Then using the mirror as the navigational metric, if you like, to seeing where the conditioning's still hiding.
And from the perspective of a separate self, we'll get stuck because um it's just like, how would you say that? It's just, it feels to me like it's just too much. It's like there's too much to defend. We can sort of see it, but we won't fully kind of
Well, yeah,
go
because it
into
wouldn't
it.
see it as a it would think the want was generally going to be fulfilled or justified by the external circumstance or situation, right? So if you're not seeing what we are and we think there's a me here in a world out there of resourcefulness or peace or happiness that I need to get,
Hmm.
either from within my own psychology or in from the external world, then of course the want's going to look legit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but if we know that it can't be, hang on a minute. So I'm looking for to get an extra £1,000 or $1,000 to feel more secure. Huh? Yeah, no, that's how would I? That's not going to make any difference. But if I'm not seeing that and think no, the £1,000 will make me more secure. I'm not saying the £1,000 might not buy me some mortgage, right? But I mean, if it thinks it's going to make the me feel more secure or valid or acceptable to society, then I'm not going to be able to see through the want,
Yeah.
and it still may be wanted, but you're gonna come at it from scarcity and lack
Hmm.
rather than from, so this is other language to put it in, I guess. You're going to come at it from scarcity and lack, so the frequency of creation is going to be coming from resistance and lack rather than of abundance and creation. So the likelihood of you getting that $1,000 is low,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
or it's
so,
going to be a lot of strive.
yeah, it's so interesting. I don't want to go here. I don't think it's a good idea to go here, but it does. What you just said is so opening up to like this bigger picture of like how the the relative world does kind of like change and come on board with it, like aligns with this in a sense. And I
Well,
just
that's
think
the
because,
creating magically part I hinted
yeah,
at earlier. How
yeah,
things can just dissolve from looking sticky and difficult and strivey and unavailable and just like, well, there's no way that's ever going to happen to pop. It's just happened.
yeah,
How did that happen? Wow. Synchronicity and serendipity come online when we're creating magically or
yeah,
when creation is happening magically. It's just like it's beyond kind of uh, linear cause and effect. Things can change and you don't really know quite how. You kind of see it in others and think they might be lucky and that's happened for them, but just that the conscious entanglement of that is where we need to have a not knowing and not a definitive knowing to the how, right? Because that's just going to take us back into there's a subject object and how does the me try and make that happen more, which
right.
again is
Which
coming
is
from
the
lack, right?
struggle that
Which is the
so
struggle.
many are in. We've
Yeah.
all been in that to some degree, and so many are in that struggle.
And our material paradigm just
Yeah.
so cynical about that,
Yeah.
right?
Like
It
how
just
can
thinks that's
I
a load of old
from
rubbish.
this sense of separation create stuff and not come from lack? And it just I just feel like that's just it's going to keep hurting, and it probably should, because
Well,
that keeps revealing, right? That the struggle of
exactly
that keeps
right. So in a
revealing that
way,
there is
the
to
reason
see
it
that,
keeps
yeah,
us frustrated and hurting is because the system's going, "Hey, you're going the wrong way," but you don't seem to notice something that's going to make it hurt even more
yeah,
until you. It doesn't really do this, right? But if we were to amortize it,
yeah,
so that's why it keeps turning up in a pattern. People fail after business after business after business, relationship after relationship. It doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work,
yeah,
right? Because the system's going wrong way.
right, right,
So follow the want, follow the field of the other, but, or and rather than but, see what we are
yeah,
first, ideally.
yeah. Yeah, and that's a whole other how do you see what we are? But that's a whole
Well, we've both got plenty of podcasts on that one, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
imagine. So direct inquiry is my go-to at the moment.
yes,
Um, but the way I suppose you see it practically rather than profundly, or
right.
if that's the word, or see it both, is through just the everyday turning up of the mirror.
Hmm.
And you can look back on that and you can go, oh my gosh, yeah, look what I was up to there.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's just how the system is learning.
I mean, and just a super simple inquiry as this stuff is coming up in the mirror all the time is like, um, yeah, where's the one who is wrong or right or needs to be defended or is upset? Like just look for the one and look in direct experience. And that's,
Yeah, direct experience. Where is it? Can I find this me that's pissed off with my daughter
yes.
separately? Can I find a separate? I mean, I know there's an apparent me turning up, but can I see that?
Yeah.
Does it look like there's a really separate her?
Yeah.
Does it look like there's which me is kind of, wanting this to happen?
Yeah. And where exactly and what exactly is that? Like what, like getting into that more and more
Because if
subtle,
you look in direct inquiry, you can't really find it.
right?
It just you go from what looks like really solid ground to go to direct experience inquiry to like, oh yeah, no,
Right.
there isn't really, is there? You know,
Which,
without there being an apparent separate me creating this psychologically, there isn't anything.
yeah, and it kind of brings us full circle too into like this sense of like we started talking about like the very abstract, highly conceptualized, right? Versus coming down into the essence of life and really looking. Like it sure feels like there's a me and I have a location that's here and what is that? Like what's that? What tells me that? Where and really just going into that in just a way that's so like words can't do it because words are already too abstract
Mm.
for it, but feeling, that's why I just talk so much about feeling, like swimming your way into that, feeling, like sensing your way into that, like feel where are you right now, what do you come up with, and inquire in a more thought-based way also. But I don't know, for me that's what really kind of made the difference is the inquiry had to become less verbal, less cognitive, and just more sensing and feeling into.
Yeah, I think you know, I always say there's two parts of the Venn diagram with a sweet spot in the middle, because it so needs to be felt if we're not attuned to that sensing.
Hmm.
However, what I've also noticed is some people who just do that without doing a kind of slightly more thought-based inquiry can then still slip back into the paradigm a little bit, because the kind of conceptual mind hasn't really undone itself. So there's a sweet spot in the middle,
Yeah.
and some people are just much more thoughty and then need to probably sense it more. Some people are a lot more sensy and probably need to actually think about it a little more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there is, and I'm putting huge generalizations on here, but somewhere in the middle there's a beautiful sweet spot.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also a mixture of the profound, should I say? I think profund's a word. The profound and the practical. And that's why this stuff shouldn't, non-duality should never sit up in an ivory tower of kind of, well, it's to be seen, to be lived, to be, to just to be the part of what it is, right? To be the psychological apparent illusion that we are. That's where a lot of the activation of this thing I'm calling the learning extravaganza will be,
Yeah.
in the practicality of it, the day to day, rather than just, you know, kind of navel gazing at it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. That's such a big point, that Venn diagram. And I tend to really push the feeling side of it because I feel like I probably was just really more into the thought side. And I think most of the people I see, although maybe they're just a mirror, but I
Well,
think
there we
many of
go.
us, I do feel like, but
Yeah.
there's just a lot of conditioning into thought. And I think the feeling piece in general tends to be kind of left behind. So I really kind of push that way more. But to your point, it's always a check and balance. It's always,
Well,
we go a little too far, then we kind of come back in the middle
yeah.
and find
I
it.
think I'll just add two bits to that. I think society has conditioned us to think a lot,
Yeah.
right? You know, so we're big thinkers. And the other nuance I'd put is the way, and the people who, this is horribly generalized, and then when the way we do feeling is wrong. I mean, that sounds a ridiculous statement, right? Because how can you do wrong? But what I mean is, we sometimes feel emotionally rather than just sensing the isness of sensation.
Yeah.
So we almost, so I was saying earlier, we feel by thinking as well.
Yeah.
So like, I had this emotion and I had it, and that's what people think, they emote rather
Yeah.
than sense. And those words are probably wrong in how I'm using them, but I'm making a distinction.
Yeah. No, that's what we need to have a whole other conversation about that, which is going to be a tough conversation to articulate, but I feel like
Yeah.
that is so massive. And it's a question I get all the time because I talk about feeling a lot lately, and like just that whole and it's impossible to really give like a formula for it, but you're right. I think there is a way of feeling that it's just there's just raw sensing, like
Yes.
if we are just energy, like I just imagine something like it's all just energy. Let this energy just hit and do whatever it needs to do. Because even emoting has a bit of a me in there. It's a bit of a story.
Yeah.
There's an abstraction pulled out of what it's about or how it feels, and it's subtler. It's more
It's,
raw than that.
yeah, it's more raw aliveness. And you know, I probably said this to you before, I don't know, you know, the cold shower is the best way to play with it, or one of the ways to play with it, because you just have the aliveness of sensation, which has gone from being, oh my God, that's cold, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, right? Which is me feeling cold
Yes.
and me feeling cold. So I'm feeling cold. I was feeling cold. I was telling you I was feeling cold, right?
Yes.
Which is turn it off, to difference to actually just being the aliveness of sensation.
Yes.
And when you're like that, it cold's kind of, yeah, is it cold? I don't know. It's just sensation. It's a different sensation to when I have the temperature on the red bit of the shower to the blue bit of the shower, but they're not. They're just both sensation.
Yes. It's what I've talked about before about like letting it like letting sensation overwhelm you in a sense. Like, get right. There's a standing apart where it's like I'm cold, but then there's just what's there before I'm cold is pulled out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's so
Yes.
basic.
Which I imagine is what 6-month-olds do.
Yeah.
They're just alive to it. They don't have a them feeling it. They're never sick. They're never like, I am ill. right? There's just symptoms occurring, right? There's just sensation. There's no them having it. So I imagine if we could work out, if we could actually see what they were up to, they wouldn't have the first part of that. They would just have sensation.
Yeah. It feels
End
like
of.
the difference between like a moment of pain versus like physical pain versus I have chronic pain. Like very
Yeah.
different, you know, and again, not that people who experience chronic pain aren't feeling pain. They are, but it's yeah, it's just
Yeah. It's
different.
just occurring. And if you don't really know you have a body, it's just different. I mean, yeah. I don't know about you. I've been last few months, I've been really into telepathy tapes. Do you know the telepathy tapes? Have you seen those?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just phenomenal. You know, the last thing they kind of realize is they're a body. It's the last thing they realize, whereas one of the first things we're taught,
Yeah.
right? So, and because the body's a hard thing for them to regulate, so they just go to, it's just, I mean, yeah, anyway, I'm segueing into that now, but it's just, if people are probably come across them already, but they're so interesting.
Yeah.
What's available in that? They should be teaching us, you know,
Yeah.
from the hill, or whatever it's called, you know. So, yeah, it's just very relevant at the moment. I've just been listening to those again and again, just going, wow, that's so powerful.
It is. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like we've been talking for 15 minutes, and I think it's been longer when I look at
It's
my
an hour and
clock.
15, but never mind. There's a 15 in there, but
No,
yeah,
thank
no,
you.
it's,
This is so good though, and I hope people can feel into where you're pointing and what we're kind of talking about here, because it's really good. It's really basic, and kind of I feel like it just kind of really gets to the essence of stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things which it's you know, it's simple but not easy,
Yeah.
and words don't do it justice. But hopefully, people can sense behind the words of the rambling whatever, and just go, yeah, although I don't really understand everything that's been said, I kind of get it.
Yeah. Yeah,
For
and then
now.
they can make it practical by like feeling into this, exploring it in a different
I mean, I
way.
suppose the simple thing to do would be just to look at any moment of life as the mirror, particularly through desires and others,
Yeah.
and just see, well, okay, rather than that's happening at me or about me, or it's just an unfolding of thought, feeling, and perception psychologically to look at, right?
Yeah.
And just to use as a feedback mechanism. That's what it is. There's a richness in that. There's a huge richness in that. And just spend an hour of your morning doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Looking at it quite forensically, not overthinking it in kind of I need to get this right, but just having that perspective can shift things.
Definitely. I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, as always. Thank you. So, listeners, as usual, have fun being curious and catch you next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also, feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.